Hi everyone, welcome. My name's Aileen and I'm a Cope First Girls brand ambassador. So I'm really happy to have you here for our MOOC this evening. Hi everyone, welcome. My name's Aileen and I'm sorry, a bit of a technical overplay, but that's what happens when we're all remote working. Anyway, so tonight we have a really exciting MOOC for you. It's going to be on the radical impact of open source with Wise. We'll be hearing from Samira first, who is a Python developer at Wise. And later on, we'll be hearing from Libby, who is the early careers lead, to talk about careers and take any Q&A. So we're really excited to have Samira kick us off. So I'll welcome her to the stage and she can say hello. Hi, Samira. Nice to
Hey.
see you.
Hi, Eileen. Nice to meet you as well.
Excellent. So
Thanks for
I'm
having
gonna
me.
No problem. You're very welcome. So for everyone watching, if you have any questions on the technical content, feel free to paste them in the YouTube's comments, and I'll share them with Samira as we go along. At the end, there will be, there's time for Q&A for Samira on like general, careers, etc., anything else related to the content, and there's time for Q&A for like careers at Wise in general with Libby. So any questions, just paste them in the chat, basically. Okay, Samira, I'm going to hand over to you now. Enjoy.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Thank you all for joining this MOOC. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about the impact of open source at Wise. So before I get into that, okay, why is my Yeah. So a bit about myself. So my name is Samira. I'm a Python developer and platform engineer at Wise. I have a master's degree in software engineering and 4 years of experience, 2 of them at Wise. I'm currently based in Tallinn, in beautiful Tallinn, Estonia, and I'm originally coming from Morocco. The topic of today, we're going to be covering the following items. So the first one is going to be a background into Wise for people who don't know about Wise. And then I'm going to be presenting a bit defining what is open source and its benefits. And then I'm going to deep dive into Pipeline Wise. I'm going to speak later about what is Pipeline Wise and also what is my experience maintaining Pipeline Wise, and there would be a demo of it. And then I'm going to also talk a bit about its impact at Wise and why would you want to contribute to open source in general. And then of course, at the end, we're going to have Q&A session. So first off, a little bit of background into Wise. So at Wise, we are a global technology company building the best way to move money around the world. Whether you're sending money to another country or spending money abroad or making and receiving international business payment, Wise is on a mission to make your life easier and save you money. So how do we do that? In practice, it's through 3 products. The first one is Wise Transfer, where we are building the world's best money transfer service, the cheaper, easier way to send money abroad. This is where it all started. But then we expanded by creating the Wise account, which is the world's most international account that allows you to hold over 40 currencies and allows you to do instant and super cheap money transfer. It also allows you to get a debit card and spend in any currency. Also, a bank details to get paid in 30 currencies and multi-currency debit, direct debit. Our customers didn't only want to send money across borders; they also wanted to hold it, spend it, and also receive money from of other currencies. And thirdly, we have our Wise platform, which brings the magic of Wise to businesses and banks, to business platforms and banks, and it's already being used by other companies such as Google, Xero, and Stripe. At Wise, we are hyper-focused on our mission, which is to build money without borders, making cross-border money movement instant, convenient, transparent, and eventually free. We now have over 10 million customers and businesses using Wise. That's where our mission comes from. It's basically what our customers tell us they want. And the team working on this mission is pretty big too. We have 2,800 employees around the globe, building the three products and taking them to every market, to market in every region. And the result of this is that £1 in every 440 of the 2 trillion, it's the 2 trillion personal cross-border volumes are moved by Wise. And it's great, but we still have a long way to go. So I hope this gives you an insight into what is Wise and its mission. And now let's get into what is open source and what is its benefits. So open source is basically any computer software that is released under a license in which the copyright holder grants users the right to use, study, change, and distribute the software and its source code to anyone and for any purpose. So basically, open source software is any software that someone has built and made public and allowed users under a certain license to be able to use it, either like for personal or even commercial reasons, as well as like change it, extend it, or like alter it however they want, and also build something on top of it and commercialize that. Open source comes with various licenses, and some of them are more restrictive than others. So it depends on the license under which it was released. And its benefits are the following. So there are many benefits. The list is not exhaustive, but I decided to go with these ones because I think these are the most important, or at least the ones that I think are the most important ones. So open source is a prominent example of open collaboration, meaning that any capable user is able to participate online in the development of the software, making the number of like collaborators basically indefinite. And with this number of indefinite collaborators, you have like a diverse perspective, all like coming together to make that open source thrive. And of course, the fact that it's open source and like the source code is public, that makes anyone able to examine that source code and like it makes the software transparent. And the fact, this transparency on top of that, there is also the fact that developers always strive in order to, like the maintainers, by developers, I mean the maintainers of the software, they always strive to build or like improve their software, close any security gaps, as well as like review any pull requests that are incoming. So like they improve their software. So this makes open source more trustable than, let's say, for example, proprietary software, which is closed source, and you don't really have any idea what is going on in there. And most of the open source is distributed freely, which means that it's quite affordable, it's cost effective to both individuals as well as companies. A lot of companies are saving fortunes by using open source. And the fact also that the source code is open and it allows anyone who like to use it as well as extend it. It's quite flexible, and it allows organizations the freedom from vendor lock-in. So where they no longer have to rely on a single provider in order to update their product. They have as long as they have some developers or like able users who are familiar with the source code, they can always extend it and contribute to that open source. And of course, there is always like learning and studying opportunities where you as an individual, you can always check, you have access to this open source software that is pretty much production ready. Like it's used by a lot of companies, and it has already proven that it's a good software. So you get to learn from it how to design better software, and even learn. You don't have to contribute to it, but you can just like build on top of it and open source whatever you're building on top of that. And so Wise, given that Wise is a technology company, we are using a lot of open source. These are examples on the left-hand side. You're going to see just like a short list of what we are using at Wise. For example, we have Python and Java. They are like the core languages at Wise. Linux, which powers the infrastructure. We have a lot of like our infrastructure is running in some variant of Linux, as well as even like our machines. So they're also using Linux. There's Terraform, which is infrastructure as a code. and Ansible for automation, Git for version control, and Docker for containerization technology, Airflow, which is a scheduler, and Superset, which is a business intelligence tool. This is just like a short list. There are many that I can't really fit in the slide. When it comes to software that has been built at Wise and has been open sourced, there is PipelineWise, which is a data replication framework. There is Neptune Web, which is a React component. There is Sequence Layout, which is a layout for Android. Currency Flag, which is a CSS, which is like a web style sheet for to give you flags for currencies, and idempotent 4G, which is a lightweight library for idempotent actions in Java. And the list also goes on. So how do we decide to open source something at Wise? Well, the first thing is that you need to build something, of course. And if you feel like whatever you build is something that would provide benefit to people outside of Wise, and then the first thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna make sure that your team lead knows about it. You don't just go and open source something that you have built. You're gonna have to check with your team lead, and then make sure that the software is whatever you're trying to open source is void of anything that references any internal proprietary knowledge or any customer related data. And we always like to celebrate our achievements at Wise. So you're gonna have you can share the news internally and invite some other engineers in order to review your software, just to get some extra pair of eyes on there, just in case maybe you forgot something proprietary in there, and it never hurts to get an extra pair of eyes to review something, especially when it comes to code. And then you choose a license. So at Wise, we always go with Apache 2. The reason is that Apache 2 doesn't grant permission to other users in order to use our trademark and brand. It's important for the company to protect its brand. But if you have something to open source, I can recommend this website called Choose a License, which is it's like a handy guide into choosing the license that best fits your open sourcing needs. And then I guess that's it. You open source then and you profit. Except that given that you're gonna you're giving up basically software for free, so there is no profit. There's only good karma. So so I mentioned maybe in a previous slide I mentioned PipelineWise, so that's gonna be my next topic. So what is PipelineWise? Why did we build it? And why we open sourced it? So PipelineWise is a data pipeline framework that uses the single specification to replicate data from various sources to various destinations. It's basically this little bird here in the middle that coordinates all of this data movement. And you might wonder what the single specification is. Well, single specification in of itself is an open source standard for moving data between databases, web APIs, files, queues, etc. Any source that might have data that is worth extracting, you can use Single for that. It basically describes how the data extracting plugins called the tabs, which are the ones on the left-hand side, and the data loading scripts or plugins that are on the left-hand side should coordinate and should communicate using a standard JSON-based data format over standard output. Standard output is it's the standard stream where a program sends its output, and basically by respecting this specification, you can have basically an infinite number of combination of tabs and targets, making it easier to create pipelines that basically pull data from a source and load it in any data analytics store or any target that you wish to. And that makes PipelineWise is it's a more or less of an orchestrator that sits on top of these tabs and targets and coordinates this data movement as well as any configuration on top of that. And its features are the following. So it's built with an ELT in mind. What is ELT? It stands for extraction, loading, and transformation. It's the opposite of that. It's a kind of a modern take on this traditional ETL approach, which like extraction, transformation, and loading. So basically, with ELT, you're trying to make when you're extracting data and loading it to your target or your analytics store, you're always gonna you want it to be as close in its original format to the data source. There is no transformation in the middle. You're not changing anything. You're just basically just extracting data and loading it in the same format. You might notice this small t here. It's because Papanware supports these like load time transformations while the data is loading. So I'm going to talk about that later. It's a lightweight software. It doesn't really require any database, and it's not a daemon. Daemon is our jobs that constantly run. It's not really a daemon. It's just something that runs, and then once it finishes moving data, it exits. So Pipeline-wise does need some kind of a scheduler to schedule like pipelines to run every 5 minutes or every 1 hour or every day, depending on how the frequency of data movement that you want. It supports multiple replication methods. The first one is log-based. It follows this pattern called CDC. CDC stands for Change Data Capture. It's a set of patterns to capture data that has only the data that has changed in the source. Some sources do support CDC, some others don't. So it depends on the source. There is the key-based incremental. It's basically a replication method that uses some sort of a key that is of an incremental nature in order to detect something that has either been added or updated, and then it loads that to the analytics store. And then there is the full table snapshots. These, I think, they are self-explanatory. Whenever they run, they don't really get the data that has changed, but rather they get the entire snapshot of your data. They are quite computationally expensive, so we don't really recommend them except when whatever you're pulling is like is a smaller size. And then it does manage schema changes. So this one means that Pipeline-wise is able to detect any changes in the source. So for example, it's assumed that you are pulling data from a table in some database, and this database belongs to some other team where they have added some column. You don't want to do any changes in order for that column to be picked up. So Pipeline-wise is able to pick up that column automatically and start extracting, making it as part of the process of extracting data. And then it supports load time transformations. So these load time transformations, we support a bunch of them. There's, for example, there's hashing of strings, there is masking of numbers, nullifying values. So these are quite important when it comes to loading sensitive data, because if especially in WISE, where we're dealing with like customer data and as well as bank details, we don't want such information to be available, let's say, for example, in the analytics store. So we use this transformation in order to obfuscate this data before it gets to the analytics store. So it basically happens here. And by the time it lands in one of these analytics store, it's already masked or hashed or nullified. And then Pipeline supports YML-based configuration. YML, for those who don't know, is like a popular file format. It's quite easy to create YML configuration, and it's mostly like the language that is used for configuration in general in a lot of tools. So having YML-based configuration means that it's easy for the end user who might not be familiar with how Pipeline-wise works in order to set up pipelines, but also it makes it easier for versioning, versioning this configuration by putting them, for example, in a GitHub repository. That way you don't have to where else would you put this configuration if it's not in a GitHub repository? And then it's extensible in the sense that Pipeline-wise itself is built on top of these steps and targets. These are some these are open source as well, and these targets are. I'm not talking about technology itself, but like the plugins that take care of extracting data or loading the data are open source. They are called either tab dash something or target dash something, and some of them we do maintain some of our own plugins. There are others that are also open source built by other companies or other individuals, and you can always add more to Pipelines, but it doesn't really take that much to support new source or a new target. So enough of Pipelines. Let's see how did we get into why did we even build Pipelines in the first place? It's gonna be a long story, so buckle up. Let's get back to early 2018. The analytics situation looks like this. We have Wise has 500 employees. It has a lot of raw and processed data. Wise has always been a data-driven company, so everything was based on like the decision making was always based on data, and all Wisers pretty much have access to the data that they need for analysis. And then some advanced analytics is being performed, which is quite useful because insights drive it helps you with the decision making and finding interesting connections. The real-time situation, however, by the real-time situation, I mean basically the product, which back then was the transfer, was the Wise transfer. So it was primarily the product, which is like the primary bulk product is the cross currency transfers, and the transaction were not instant. They can be delayed up to 1 hour. And as the company grows, there are more new products planned. And this means that there was less tolerance for delayed transactions, especially that if you remember, one of the mission pillars was the instant. So like delay in transaction was no longer really possible. So we needed to have faster and faster transactions. This requires a more robust real-time environment, which is the infrastructure on which the product runs. And thus, that's how what is called the project Level Up was born, to improve the real-time architecture. So this was all great. Like Level Up was a great project, except it broke the analytics. Why? Because the Level Up was about breaking the monolith into microservices. For people who don't know what monolith or microservices mean, basically a monolith is it's a traditional way of designing software where you have your entire software is basically one huge code base. Your front end, your back end, your business logic, the data lives in one big database. So everything is basically centralized in one huge app. And it's not really as like when you want to grow and scale, it's not really possible to do that with a monolith. And microservice has microservice architecture, like it did start being like popular some years ago. And the microservice architecture is basically when you break your business into smaller services. That's why like they're called microservices, and each microservice takes care of one business domain, and all it does is basically everything around that domain. It doesn't really do anything with other domains. So and then like you can have microservices speaking to each other via some protocol. It can either be via like a HTTP or like a REST call or whatever other protocols are available. One principle in the microservice architecture is that each microservice needs to have its own data store. This means that now the data is distributed. You have data living in various databases, which makes analytics pretty much impossible. Like it's not possible to cross-join like data from this database and data from another database, because it's just not possible. So a bunch of people came together in order to find a solution or to find a patch for this situation. And they used this thing called PG Chameleon, which so basically they first decided to create this Analytics DB, which was a Postgres database, and they wanted to copy the data from all of these microservice data stores or databases into this Analytics DB. So they wanted this something that would copy the data from these data stores into the Analytics DB, and they used this tool called PG Chameleon. But it can only do like moving data from MySQL to Postgres. But microservices used other type of databases like Postgres itself. So Postgres was being handled with Bash full table snapshots. I guess, yeah, it's fine. I guess it does sound fine, except no, everything was constantly breaking and needing attention, and it was mostly catching up over the weekend. And the fact that the AnalyticsDB was a Postgres database made the analytical queries run for days. Postgres is not really suitable for analytical queries. So yeah, it wasn't really, I'm sure that it wasn't really productive weeks for the analyst back then. So this whole situation really needed some attention and really like serious attention here. So the team or whatever, like a bunch of people who like were looking after this issue, decided, okay, we needed to focus on certain areas. The first one is that we needed to speed up the analytical queries. So what they did is that they went and looked for what are the available proper analytical stores that are available out there. And they did some like comparison, and they ended up picking one which we're currently still using, and we're quite happy with it. It's a great piece of software. I'm not going to mention any names, but yeah. And then the second focus area is stabilizing the data replication. So this one was a bit more challenging because it's not something that you can do overnight. And there is pretty much no, like at that time, there was nothing that would do that. You need to do like some serious research in order to find something that would do like, that would allow you to do data replication from all of these data stores, the various data stores into one analytical store. So they decided to come up with the requirements of a solution, and these are the requirements. So the first one is that it should be able to handle and replicate data from hundreds of data sources into a central analytical store. Why 100? Well, it's because, as the monolith is being broken more and more into smaller microservices, you're going to have more and more smaller databases being spun up. So you're going to have to like handle hundreds. And currently, the migration actually is still ongoing. We're still migrating from the monolith. And the second one is that it should be compatible with the data sources used at WISE. Back then, it was mainly MySQL/MariaDB and Postgres databases. And then it should support the change data capture, which I mentioned earlier. So as a reminder, it stands for, it's a set of patterns that allow you to only detect changes in the data that has changed, not everything. So why this, you might ask? It's because capturing the changes in the data means that you're gonna keep the lag a bit low, and it's quite important because you don't want to be analyzing data that is old. And we have some security requirement. The first one is self-hosting. Why is that? It's because, WISE being in the fintech industry, this industry is quite regulated, and we basically have to host everything that we run. Everything needs to stay in our infrastructure premise. We cannot allow data to move outside of WISE because we're dealing with like customer personal data, and we're dealing also with like financial data. So we cannot allow that to get to leave our premise. And the second one is that we want this tool to be able to allow us to obfuscate and mask sensitive data, as I said, because we're dealing with customer data. So we don't want to, just expose it internally. Even if it stays internally, we don't want to expose it to the employees. It should be able to detect schema changes and automatically apply them. So by that, I mean that if something has changed in the source, it should be able to be detected automatically and be applied. It should be able to scale because as I mentioned, microservices, the number of microservices is growing, but the company also is growing and the data is growing. So it should be able to allow us to scale. And we don't want to be locked into any vendor. So we would wish if this solution would be an open source, but sometimes we do actually also consider like managed software. That is software that we don't host our no, we host ourselves. It's closed source, basically. We don't have access to the source code. And then it should also allow us configuration as a code, because as I mentioned, you want to version your configuration, you want to put it in a GitHub repository or a GitLab repository or whatever version control you're using. So because it's how things are done. So, oh, yeah. So with these requirements in mind, the team has started looking into available solutions. The thing though is that analysts can't just sit down and not do anything. They need data to analyze. They need reports to send out. They need insights to share. So the business is to continue, and we cannot wait like months to find an available solution or like the proper solution. So with this pressure on the team, they decided to come up with a temporary solution. And what they found is this single specification and a couple of tabs or targets that supported the databases that are used at Wise, as well as the analytical store that we use. And they built a hacky wrapper around it basically and started running it just to satisfy the analysts. And the analysts actually quite liked the data availability, and they were satisfied, which gave basically the team time to look for the for like a proper solution. Right. So the search for the solution ended up being like the team ended up finding basically two solutions. The first one is traditional ETL tools. The pros, there are no pros for Wise's use case. The cons, well, there is no ability to read the CDC logs. It's generally suitable for the waterfall management process, which like it takes like you only iterate in a solution at the end after, I don't know, like 6 months of starting a project, whereas Wise does agile, so it likes to iterate on solutions fast within like 2 weeks or 1 week. So yeah, it's not really suitable. And creating pipes takes a long turnaround time, so it's not really that productive or effective. And any changes in the source schema would take like ages in order to be implemented for the pipe to continue working. And the second solution was the commercial replication tools. So these were quite promising. They can consume CDC and they are easy to set up. But the problem though is that they don't really conform to the security requirements that we have at Wise. They are all SaaS. SaaS stands for software as a service, in the sense that, well, first of all, we don't have access to the source code in most cases. Well, not always. There are some SaaS that is built on top of open source, but anyway, it's all SaaS, which means that it's the company, that third-party company itself, that is hosting it. It's hosting it in its infrastructure, which means that if we were to choose these tools, we're gonna have to allow them to access data in our own databases at Wise, which means like access to customer data and financial data, and we cannot allow that. It doesn't conform to the security requirements. And the second problem is that it's pricey. They're just super pricey for some reason, and some of them have their pricing model has they basically rely on like the price depends on how much data you want to move. So as like the data that you want to move grows, the price also grows, and it's not really cost effective, especially that Wise grows, and we don't really want to be locked into a solution that is super expensive, because at the end of the day, these expenses end up being fees for our customers. And one of the pillars of Wise's mission is that we want to be eventually free. So yeah. As you can see, there was these two available solutions were not really viable solutions, and the team gave up and abandoned the search in December 2018. They decided then to focus on the hacky wrapper that actually ended up becoming Pipeline-Wise. And they focused on improving the quality of Pipeline-Wise, as well as steadily improving the stability and features. And one aspect also of improving it is hiring Python developers, which was not something that is familiar at Wise, because it's a Java shop. So that's where I came in. I was hired as the first Python developer at Wise. And did this actually ended up being successful? Yes, because 9 months later, it was open sourced. And you can see on this tweet from Wise's CEO about the news, like sharing the news of us open sourcing the tool. Fun fact is that when I was interviewing for the Python developer role, it was back in May or June 2019. So the tool hadn't been open sourced yet. So by the time I joined, which was in 2nd of September 2019, I suddenly discovered that I'm going to be maintaining an open source project, which was quite a great surprise, because I've always been a fan of open source, and I've always admired open source maintainers, because well, I didn't know how does one become a maintainer, and I always assumed that people would be like, these maintainers would be like they have a lot of experience, and they do. I mean, a lot of maintainers have a lot of experience. They are working for like big tech companies. So yeah, maybe like one of the ways of becoming a maintainer is that you join a team that has an open source project, and yeah, you end up being a maintainer. So why did we open source it, you might ask? Well, it's the following. We realized that we had built something that was quite useful, and we wanted to like share it with others, especially that there was nothing at that time. There was nothing like it at that time. And given that open source is something is making, basically it's making your source code transparent. Well, it only respects one of the wisest values, which is transparency and fair practices. And we believe that PipeLineWise is good enough quality in order to, other people making use of it, and it won't tarnish Wise's reputation, I hope. And given that PipeLineWise is built on top of open source, be it the single spec or the tabs and the various tabs and targets that are available out there, it only makes sense to contribute back to the community and making it open source, and it feels good somehow. And we hope that external developers would be inspired to contribute, thus making it thrive and allowing it to further improve. So as a maintainer of PipeLineWise, as a part of the analytics platform team, which is the team that is the creator of PipeLineWise and the maintainer of it, I want in the next section to share my experience and I guess lessons learned from maintaining PipeLineWise. So it's great. Working on open source is great. It's as a developer, I use a lot of open source tools, be it Git, be it Ubuntu, be it Docker, and a lot of other tools. So it's great to give back to the community by making something open source and allowing other people to make use of it. Also, the fact that my contributions to it are public, anyone can check them out. It pushes me to strive to write high quality code. And there is also the fact that PipeLineWise has gathered a small community around it, like a small user base around it, some more loyal than others, and they are always interested in like hearing the roadmap for PipeLineWise, what's next for it. And it's great to connect with people outside of Wise, like about something that we share in common, which is using PipeLineWise. And also the fact that PipeLineWise uses the single spec, it's now part of that ecosystem. There are other players in that ecosystem. They have built something that would be considered as like competitor of PipeLineWise, but we don't really see it that way. We encourage them. They actually do refer to us sometimes. So it's more of a collaboration rather than like competition. And it's great to like be able to collaborate with the smart people outside of Wise. And of course, it allows me exposure. So I'm currently doing a talk. So and it's not always dandy, because it does require a lot of time. You have to like attend to the user base, our external user base, by answering any questions that they might have, helping them with any issues, and also tending to any pull requests that they are sending, any contributions that they are sending. There's also dealing with like low quality. There's also spam, like low quality issues or low quality contributions that we have to deal with and like sift through. And sometimes, like in this, when someone is making a contribution, you have to do like a back and forth between the two of you, like the three of you, or however many people are included in the discussion, and that takes time sometimes. There's also from time to time you get these I would call them entitled external users. They feel, I don't know, they feel like they deserve your support and your time in order to help them. it can be frustrating sometimes. And then, of course, when we are at the analytics platform, when we are designing something, a new feature in pipeline-wise or something like that, we always keep in mind that we're not introducing any breaking changes. We're not doing anything that we're not using anything that is specific to Wise, but rather we're making like changes or building features that would be still be used outside of Wise by other people. So yeah, time for a demo. So let me bring up my PyCharm. So just for the sake of time, I have prepared an environment here that simulates a source and a target. Can you share my? Can you see my? Oh, actually no. Sorry, I need to stop sharing my screen and then. Okay. All right, I hope that you can see my screen. Yeah. All right, so I have prepared a small project here to do a demo. So my source, I decided to go with, my source is gonna be a MariaDB database, and my target is gonna be Postgres. So the first thing that you're gonna do is that you're gonna we have PipelineWise is available as a Docker image. You can find it in Docker Hub, where the public images are hosted. It's in the TransferWise. There is an organization called TransferWise Workspace. So not confused with another one called TransferWise. That's not us. It's another one called TransferWise Workspace. And then yeah, that's when you're gonna pull the latest image. I don't think you can. It's too small. Yeah. Let me just zoom in a bit. Yeah, so I hope you can see. All right. So so the first thing you're gonna do is that well, you can always use PipelineWise. We have the PipelineWise repository. You can always use it from there. Or if you want, if you're familiar with Docker and you want to use a Docker image, you can use it. You can use a Docker image that is available. We have released the latest version, which is 0.36.0. And what you're gonna do is basically just pull it. I have. I think I'm gonna exit the presentation mode. All right, I already. I already have it locally, so I don't really need to. It's already up to date. You're gonna see it here. So the next thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna generate. So PipelineWise allows you, if you don't know how to create pipelines, like the configuration, you can always make use of this command that we have in PipelineWise that generates basically samples that we have. You can also find those samples in the repository, but yeah, you can also generate them using this command. It's basically this. So TransferWise. So you call in the container, and then init the name of the folder. So here I'm gonna name it samples, something like that. All right, I'm gonna run it. All right, so it's a lot of samples because we support a lot of sources, but I'm gonna show them here. So they should be created here. I don't know how to zoom in. Let me do something. I'm gonna increase the font a bit. I hope it's clear.
I think it's a decent size, Samira.
Yeah?
It's okay, yeah. Especially if
All right.
yeah, the audience just enlarge the whole video, like the YouTube video, I think it'll be okay.
All
I'll
right,
let you
cool.
know if there's any comments that's a bit too small.
All right, cool. Cool, thanks. All right, so these are the samples that Papillonwise generates. You can see that we support a lot. All of these that start with tab are the sources that we support. So you might be familiar with some, like for example, tab S3 CSV or MongoDB or Kafka or Jira, even Slack, even Snowflake if you know Snowflake. There are others like Zora. I have no idea what Zora is, but it was an external contribution. And then we support these 4 targets. Actually, we support 5. It's not mentioned here. Anyway, so we support Postgres, Redshift. It's an Amazon product. S3 CSV, which is also S3 is an Amazon product, and Snowflake. There's another one which is BigQuery, which is an analytical query by Google, but it's not here. I think I should add it later to the samples. Anyway, so what you're gonna do like once you have these samples, you're gonna basically delete the ones that you're not interested in and keep the ones that you're interested in, and also remove update the name to remove all of these dot samples. Only keep .yml because that's how it's gonna be detected. I have already prepared my pipelines here. I'm gonna stick with tab MariaDB and target Postgres. And then you might notice this config. This config has its alert handlers. It's because Papillonwise supports alerting, and you can either send alerts to Slack or VictorOps. VictorOps is one of the tooling of like paging people. When there is something, an incident, for example, or an alert. It's usually VictorOps is usually used for like a severe critical issue. So you don't want to be paging people in the middle of the night. But Slack is usually for the warnings. But anyway, I'm not gonna have any alerts. So yeah, I'm gonna just leave them disabled. All right. So in order to simulate like a source and a target, I'm gonna be using Docker Compose, where I have created two services. One is the MariaDB source and the target data warehouse. So the source is a MariaDB image. I have configured it here. These are environment variables that they are coming from here. It's just like sample dummy credentials, and this one is Postgres 12. So they are all in the same network because I want them to all be. I want Papillonwise, because Papillonwise is running in a Docker container. I want it to be able to connect and find these containers. That's why they are all sharing the same network. Yeah, I have also populated the MariaDB because it's my source. So I have populated it with some dummy data. There are 2 tables. It's a lot of dummy data, so bear with me. So there is this table called EG data, where it's usually we like to name it that way because it usually contains data with like EG cases. For example, you have Chinese here, and new lines and space and like these like EG data. So they are quite good to have in your tests in order to make sure that Papillonwise is going to be able to handle this EG data. There is address table. It's a bunch of just random addresses, and then we have weight unit. It's also just a bunch of weight units. Yeah, it's all just dummy data to play with. And then my target is empty because, of course, I'm going to be moving data from MariaDB to Postgres. So my target is empty. All right. So my pipelines. Oh, yeah. In the pipelines, that's how you're going to set up the pipeline. So this is the YAML format that I was talking about earlier. This is the configuration, the YAML-based configuration. You can see that it's not rocket science or anything. It's literally just like key and values here. I have the ID. I called it MariaDB. Name can be anything. This one should be the name of the type. So you're gonna have to master your types. It's not really that difficult. You have tab MySQL here. You might wonder, why is this MySQL and I'm using MariaDB? That's because MariaDB is a sub project. It's kind of like it inherited from a sub project of MySQL. So basically, yeah, MySQL was open source and MariaDB was built on top of it with like other features. So yeah, but the image itself, but tab MySQL supports both MariaDB and MySQL, so that's fine. It's fine to call it MySQL. And the source. So the host here should be the name of the container, which is here. And then the port is the port. I'm gonna find it's in the environment. It's in the environment. Yeah, it's the port on the not the host port, but rather the container port, which is 3306, which is the usual port for MariaDB. And the user is pipeline-wise, password is just secret, and my database is called MySQL source DB. I should have started with target, but yeah, target is the first one that you need to create. So its ID is Postgres data warehouse. The host also points to the name of the container. It's here, and then yeah, and then the port for Postgres is always 55432, and then the user's pipeline-wise secret, and the database is Postgres data warehouse. And then what you're gonna do is that you create the tab and point it to this target. Basically, you're telling it, oh, this is my source, and then I want it to extract data into Postgres. So that's why there is the mention of target here. It's using the ID of that target. And then the batch size rows. This is how big the size of the batch. So the targets usually work in batches, in the sense that when they are receiving data, they keep them in memory until that batch is reached, and then they flush them to the target or to the database or the target or whatever underlying technology that they are using. So in this case, I'm gonna go with just 1,000, which is the minimum allowed in pipeline wise. Because usually with batches you're getting better performance. Some not really in Postgres, but for example in Snowflake, you're gonna get better performance by inserting, let's say, 1,000,000 rows than inserting like 10 or one row at a time. So yeah, this is for optimizing load performance. And then you're gonna start setting up the tables that you're interested in. So here I have the source schema. The source schema points to the schema in the source. MySQL doesn't really, MySQL or MariaDB don't really have a notion of schema. The schema is the name of the database, so I'm going to be using the same name here. It's going to be here. And then the target schema is basically the name of the schema that should be, how the schema in the target should be named. So I'm calling it MySQL replica. And then I'm going to start setting up tables. So here, as I mentioned earlier, so here I'm already connected to the databases. You can see here, I'm going to refresh. You're going to see here that I have 3 tables. I have address, e.g. data, and weight unit. So for weight unit, I'm deciding to set it up like this. What does this configuration mean? It means that, well, first of all, I want to replicate this table, and there is no mention of replication method. That's because it's going to be falling back to default replication method in tab MySQL, which is log-based. And tab MySQL does support log-based because MySQL has this logs. They are called bill logs. That's where they are basically registering there are basically logs of everything that is happening in the database, be it inserts, updates, deletes, truncates, and a lot of other operations. But in MySQL, in pipeline-wise, we are only interested in inserts, updates, and deletes. We ignore anything else that is happening in that database, because that's not something that we care about. So this weight unit here is gonna use the log-based, the default one, which is log-based. And the address, I decided to go with incremental. And why is that? So incremental, I don't really have any reason except that I just wanted a variety of replication methods. And you need to pick a replication key or a column that has a an incremental value. So the most suitable one among these values is date updated. That way, you're going to be able to detect updates and insert. So whenever there is a row that gets updated in this table, the date updated would be updated, so it's going to be picked up. And whenever there is a new insert, that date updated would be the same as date created, so it's going to be detected. The only downside with incremental is that it doesn't detect deletes, because there is no way to delete deletes, because it's literally just running a select query where date updated greater than some value that pipeline-wise has kept in its state. So yeah, I've also added some transformations here. So we support a bunch of transformations. One of them is set null. I want to set, so the address is usually a personal identifying information that you want to obfuscate. So one I have here too, you have the street number and the zip code. So I want to obfuscate street number. So I decided to go with set null. I can always hash it because it's a varchar, so I can always hash it. And the hash of a value is a string, so it's not going to cause any issues when it comes to the column, the equivalent column in the target. But I just had to go with set null. It's fine. And then there is the zip code ID column. This one I went with mask number. Why? I can always hash it, but it's not really going to work. Why? Because the zip code is of type big int, and if you were to hash it, it's going to generate a string, and the column in the target is going to be another big int. You cannot insert a string into a big int, so it's going to have to be an int, which means, and the only transformation that allows to keep the numbers as numbers is mask number. You can always nullify a number, which like null, you can insert null into a big int column, but you cannot insert a string into a big int column. So yeah, there's other type of transformations, but these are the ones that I'm doing in this demo. So yeah, I think I'm all set, and I'm gonna start. So what do I do then? I'm gonna start. So yeah, once you have your pipelines ready, you're gonna have to import them. So let me comment out this. Oops. So what does import mean? So it's running this import command. It's pipeline-wise import -- directory, and you point to the directory here. So import means that it's running the discovery mode. Discovery mode is it's something in the Singer specification, where basically what the tab is trying to do is it's trying to discover and explore the source and extract as much information out of the source as possible. So be it, for example, the columns, the columns of the tables, their types, as well as some other metadata that is quite useful when it comes to moving data and also instructing the target how the table should look like, because you need that data. Well, otherwise the target wouldn't even be able to know how to handle the data that you're dealing with, or like you're sending it. So it needs to have a schema of the data that you're sending it. So, all right, I'm gonna run import. All right, so it was quite quick. We have the total targets to import. There is one, which is indeed the case. We have one tab to import, and we have no issues. So what you're gonna, so this is the file. This is the files that are gonna be created. You're gonna have these list of targets that are available that have been explored. There's its ID. So basically, it's turning the YAML files that you give it into configuration files that pipeline-wise can recognize and work with. And this is the target. It's the ID of the target. This is the tab. You can see here the credentials that we've given in the target YAML file, and then in the tab you're gonna see here the credentials of the source, and then these are the things that this is the output of the discovery. You're gonna see here the streams. So tables in tabs are called streams. Basically, every little unit or source of data is called stream. So it's a table, for example, is a stream, and you have a bunch of information about the stream. So For example, it's structured in terms of JSON schema. So for example, here you're going to see that there is the address ID column. It's of type integer. The maximum value is here. The minimum value is there. You have date time. Date created is of type string, but its format is date time, etc. So all of this information is gonna be sent later to the target, and it's gonna help it create the equivalent table that is gonna house the data that would be sent to it. So yeah, let's now start this sync. Let me uncomment the command. So Paperwise is an ephemeral container. That's why you see, for example, here that I'm calling the container and running this command inside of it, because once it's done doing its thing, it gets destroyed. That's why I mentioned earlier that you need a scheduler in order to run these like sync commands. I don't know, like however frequently you want the data to be updated. So this is the command that pulls the data. It's run tab -- the ID of the tab. It's called MariaDB, and the target ID, which is Postgres Data Warehouse. And let's go. So here it's gonna start syncing. It's gonna use fast sync. So fast sync is a component that we have built that doesn't conform to the Singer spec. This is a way of syncing, doing like the initial sync. Because you want the full table snapshot of the table. That's why we use it fast sync, because it basically bypasses the Singer spec. It doesn't use the JSON format, but rather just does an export from the database and dumps it into the target. But later we start using Singer. So if I check now my target, I should be able to see these tables. So if I go to you can also see the logs here. And all right, so let's see my target schema earlier that I mentioned in the configuration here. This one. So I'm gonna see whether I have the tables present in the information schema. And indeed, it's the case. I have now 2 tables in my target. So as you can see here, I'm looking at the target here, and let's see if we have any data in there. Actually, we do. All of this has been copied from the MySQL database. And then what about the weight unit table? It's also the case. And then, okay, so now let's start doing actual changes in the source. Okay, I need to close all of these things. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna start doing some changes here. So the first one is, for example, I'm gonna insert I'm gonna insert a new address. So address, as I mentioned earlier, if you remember, it's used as incremental. So insert should be updated, and we have in the if you notice here, there is the date created. It uses the current timestamp, so I don't have to actually provide it. The database is gonna populate it for me. So I'm just gonna insert this new record. Yeah, one row inserted, and then let's, for example, delete some stuff from the weight unit. So let's delete anything that has weight unit greater than 20. I believe that we have around 28 rows in there, so delete. So 8 rows. All right, cool. So we have 28 here. So now I'm gonna run the same command again. I'm not gonna change anything. Why? Because Paperwise keeps a state of where it left off from the previous run. It's this one. So for the weight unit, it's using build log, and the build log is this. So my SQL build log is now currently looking at the file 0.00003, and the position is this. Whereas for address, it's using replication key date updated, and the last value that it has recorded is this. So now it's going to detect anything that has been created and greater with the date updated greater than this value. And it's gonna, of course, the build log is gonna record the delete that we just did. So let me just run the same command again. Yep. So you're gonna see here that it says that no table available that needs to be synced by fancy. That's because we already have a state for these tables. They're not using full table, so they're gonna continue from there we left off. They're not gonna do like basically like being synced from scratch again. They're gonna use the syncer. So it finished again. So let's see. So what did we do previously? So I need to look. We inserted something with ID address ID. So if I look in the address, so select star from MySQL replica the address where address ID equals 2000. I should see it. Yeah, you can see here that it was inserted, created, and well, updated is the same as created here. So it was detected. It's the one that we just inserted. And then how about the weight? So we deleted everything that has a weight unit ID greater than 20. So it should be the same thing. The same thing should happen also in the target. So if I do select star from weight, no, MySQL replica the weight unit where weight ID is greater than, was it 20? Yeah. Well, there's nothing. It got deleted. We are using, so in most of the targets, they support hard as well as soft deletes. Hard deletes are enabled by default. So hard delete means that if they detect a delete, they're gonna actually delete it from the table. So if you disable hard delete, it's gonna just mark it as deleted. And how does it mark it? There is this like metadata column called underscore SDC deleted at, that has the name, that has the date when it was deleted. So it was detected as deleted. So yeah, I haven't disabled it, so that's why it got rid of those rows. So yeah, I think that's I think that pretty much sums up the what PipelineWise does. So let's get back into our presentation. I think I'm gonna have to stop sharing again, and in order to share my screen. Yep. All right. Cool. Oops.
Yeah, it's seeing the wrong view. You might do it try again.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay, it happens.
I have two monitors. It's quite confusing.
Choosing the right screen. Don't worry.
Okay, impact. I think it's this one. Cool. All right. All right. So now that we're done with the demo, let's move on to what is the impact of PipelineWise Wise. So without PipelineWise, it's PipelineWise is a cornerstone technology at Wise. Without it, our analytics store would be mostly empty because there would be nothing moving data from all of these 100. So currently we have around 500 microservices. Each of it is has its own database. We're also pulling data from other sources. So it's gonna be mostly, without PipelineWise, it's gonna be mostly empty, and it saves a fortune because we don't have to pay anyone to replicate our own data. And the most viable replacement currently is a commercial one that charges for the number of volume of the data that we're currently moving. It charges around $250,000 per month, and this is limited by the amount of data. So if you want to move more data, you're going to have to pay more. So by not having to pay this much money, it's gonna be less. It means less fees for our customers. And of course, there's always cost. Like there's always the cost of actually running Pappenwise in our infrastructure, but it's definitely not as close to this number. To this number, yeah. And it's also a big project. You might hear me talk about Pappenwise only, but Pappenwise is just an orchestrator. We have other plugins. We have the tabs and the targets that we maintain ourselves, and there are 22 repositories. So the code is quite distributed, and that means the entire footprint of Pappenwise is actually 23 repositories under the GitHub and the TransferWise GitHub repository. You can always check it out. You can go to the TransferWise GitHub organization and look for Pappenwise, and you're gonna see how many Pappenwise repositories we're dealing with. And then it's quite active in terms of the open source community is quite active in our repository. We're constantly getting external PRs. We currently have 21 external contributors with at least one merged PR. And I'm gonna leave you to read the rest of the stats. And we currently have around 400 GitHub stars. So that's a lot of stars, and I'm quite proud of that. And yeah, it does. Pappenwise aligns with our values in the sense that making it's open source, so like there is transparency, and Wise is it's all about fair practices and transparency, and it also democratizes data by making analytics available to everyone. You don't necessarily have to use it for analytics. Some people move data for whatever reasons, but it's mostly for analytics. And we currently also have 277 data pipelines pulling data from all of these sources that you can see on the screen. We have Kafka, we have Postgres, MariaDB, Amazon S3, Zendesk API, Twilio, Slack, and GitHub. We're actually, it's a lot of data. It's a lot of data to the point that we just in September 2021, just last month, we replicated around 111 billion records in that month. It's a lot of records, and the median is 2.7 billion daily, and yeah, it's I'm still amazed by like the amount of data that Pappenwise is able to handle. It's just so great. It's also the fact that we have open source Pappenwise. That means that it allows us to attract new employees, because developers, well, one of the aspirations of developers is like contributing to winning open source software that belongs to companies and organizations with good reputation. So yeah, it does make it a bit easier to hire new employees, and it's also easier when you are doing I don't know, like a screening interview, for example, to redirect people to Pappenwise and ask them, hey, you have this repository, this is what we're gonna be working on. If you join the team, this is what you're gonna be maintaining. So like, feel free to check it out. And yeah, it's a great like way of having like the developers or like new employees having the ability to see the source code that they're going to be maintaining. Is I don't think that's something that you usually get, because you usually don't know what you're going to be working on when you join a company. And also the fact that we're getting a lot of good feedback, and Pappenwise has been useful to the open source community. This is a collated feedback from the open source community. It's always great to hear people, people giving us like good feedback about it and how they like it. So, and there's also this great feedback from one of our engineering leads at Wise. He's quite impressed with like the system that we have built and how it's scaled to handle the number of data or the volume of data that we're dealing with at Wise. And last thing is, why would you want to contribute to open source? So the first thing is, well, it basically makes you a better developer. You have this production ready software that is public, that you can always check and learn from. You can see how people are designing solutions to problems, and you can always build on top of that or get inspired by it and build something maybe like better, and open source that as well, or even like commercialize it and make a business out of it. There are like companies out there that have used open source and built commercial tooling on top of it. As developers also, you are using a lot of open source, whether you know it or not. So it's just great to give back to the community and help open source thrive. You don't have to contribute per se by, I don't know, like making pull requests or adding new features. Just the fact that you are running the open source on your local machine, and if you stumble upon some issue or something and you report it, that on its own helps the maintainers a lot, because with open source you have like a huge user base, and the maintainers can only test their code on so many machines. Yes, it's going to work on their machine, it's going to work on their colleagues' machines, but it might not work on other machines that have different specifications. So yeah, if you notice that there is something, if you notice a bug in the software, report it and help that software thrive. And of course, by contributing, and well, the best thing is that you should, if you were to contribute by fixing bugs or adding new features, then it's gonna build your confidence as a developer. There's nothing better than having like your pull request get approved by a maintainer of an open source and get that merged into a project. And then, of course, by making contributions, you're going to build a great portfolio. You can always put that in your CV and share it with like recruiters, and they're gonna always, because your contributions are public, they're gonna always be able to see it, or the companies are gonna be able to see it. And of course, if you are using an open source and you're loyal to it and like you're involved a lot in it, then you might be able to build a professional network by collaborating with the other, with the maintainers or other collaborators in that open source. So yeah, I think that's it for me. Any questions? I hope that you enjoyed this, first of all. So any questions?
Thanks, Samira, for taking us through that. That was really interesting, especially about the open source and why people should get involved. I do have a number of questions, which I will share. You can see it, it'll come up as a banner, and then we'll talk through it.
Okay.
So the first one is, how did you become interested in tech?
Well, I have always been interested in science. First of all, at a young age, I was always interested in like assembling things and disassembling and disassembling them and then assembling them again. And well, I mostly failed because I forget how to assemble stuff. But yeah, I was always into science. I remember that the defining moment for me was when my older brother got a laptop, and it was the first time for me to see a laptop. Like I was only used to this like a huge desktop laptop with like this huge footprint, and seeing a laptop was something super fascinating to me, because how is this like small machine more powerful than that huge code base, and sorry, that huge desktop. And at some point, something, I don't know, like something popped into my head that, okay, I wasn't really interested in the hardware. I was more interested in whatever software is running in that laptop. Like, who are the people behind it? Like, how do you build such software? Well, I was mostly talking about like the games, like Solitaire and those games that come with Windows. But yeah, I was super interested in that. But so I wanted to get into informatics. I didn't know anything about programming. I didn't know anything about any of this. I just wanted to. All I knew is that I wanted to get into like work with the computers. So in high school, I graduated with physics diploma. Like I was into science, but not really the theoretical part. That's why I could have always gone with math, but I ended up going with physics because I like how it mixes up the theory as well as like the practical, because like physics is the application of math to the real world. And then getting that diploma allowed me to apply and get into one of the engineering schools back in Morocco. And one of the engineering schools had I applied to it and got accepted because it offers an informatics program, and among other disciplines, engineering disciplines. So yeah, I started without actually knowing even that I would be programming or anything. Like I didn't even know about programming. I just knew that I wanted to get into informatics. And yeah, 5 years later, I ended up graduating with a master's degree in software engineering. So Yeah.
That's amazing. Did you make any computer games in the end?
Yeah. I mean, I did make some during my university time.
Yeah.
I also, yeah, I did make some small games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. And another question. What do you wish you knew at the start of your career in tech? What would you tell like a younger version of yourself?
Mm, that's an interesting question. What do you wish you knew at the start of your career in tech? Um, I would say that it's gonna be. I mean, given that the tech is a male-dominated field, I would be I mean, I don't know, like, I already got into the tech knowing that this is a male dominated field, but it still kind of surprised me how the number of how low the number of women in the field is, and how sometimes like condescending your male partner, like your male colleagues can be. So yeah, but I think that even if I had known that, I wouldn't change my decision to get into tech. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I guess it's just a bit of like, on hindsight or reflection, right, of your journey so far. And then final question before I get Libby onto the stage. So, no, wrong one, sorry. Do you have any book, podcast, or video recommendations that you want to share with the audience that we have today that you think will be helpful?
So when it comes to podcasts, so I am a Python developer, so like I listen only to podcasts, well, mostly to podcasts that are about Python. There's this one that I really like called Python Bytes. So it's quite cool. There's also one that is not really about engineering, but rather it's about the soft skills in engineering. I mean, it's a that usually like engineers and developers have this stereotype where like they are always focusing on their laptops and they are lacking in terms of soft skills. Well, it's not really the case, but anyway, it's just stereotypes. But yeah, there is this podcast I really like called Soft Skills Engineering, where people would like submit some questions, and there are two hosts, and they would answer the questions. So yeah, I really like that one. In terms of books. I don't really like to read books because I like to go along and like to go along a video or like a MOOC or something like that and like develop. I don't really learn from theory. I learn rather from practice. But in terms of book, there is this. It's also a Python thing. It's called Fluent Python. It's one of the best books in about Python. There is also one that I heard a lot about, which like good recommendations about, which is called the Data Intensive Applications. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, actually, we managed to get one more question from the audience. It just came through. So Charlotte's asking, did you find it challenging being the first Python programmer at Wise?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I would. It was the fact that I had no one to actually like. I was basically the only one in the company with that title, so there was no one like to share with, like to discuss with about these about Python in general. There was no one to consult. There was no senior colleague to consult with. It was just me, and there were some. I'm not saying that Python was not being used at the company. It was being used, but mostly for scripting and like data science and analytics. Whereas I'm coming to the company with like a software engineering background, so I'm using Python for software engineering, which is a totally different kind of way of using Python. So yeah, we have actually hired some Python, a bunch of other Python developers, so I'm no longer the only one. But yeah, I'm still. It's still. I guess another challenge is that I find it hard to learn or like pick up new things from whatever is happening in the company tech wise, in the sense that everything is around Java, like best practices, those tech blogs, or like anything that is written about tech in the company is written for Java. So for me, it's not really that useful. So yeah, it is still challenging, but that's why I kind of decided to like look for the content outside of Wise. There's nothing I can do. It's outside of my control.
Yeah, that's so funny. You need more Python stuff in there. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
answering those questions. That was really good. So
Thank
I'm
you.
just going to add Libby onto the stream. And Libby is the early careers leads, and we'll be talking to everyone a little bit of the careers at Wise. Libby, why not you go for it? You're just on mute, Libby.
Hi. Thank you, Samira. That was such a brilliant talk. I personally learned so much, and I hope that everyone has found that really, really valuable. I wanted just to spend a few minutes talking to you about some of the roles that we have available currently at Wise. If you've been inspired by Samira and interested in some of the work that we currently do and you want to investigate working for us further, then we have some opportunities available. So you can always search all of our opportunities on wise.jobs, and that will take you right through to everything that's live and open and available to apply to. But I just wanted to highlight firstly, we have a really, really exciting opportunity. For the first time this year, we've launched a program called Wise Women Code, and that's going to take place next spring. So it will take place on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of April. And it's a 3-day immersive event. It's going to take place in our London office. It is essentially going to be a mix of work experience. So there'll be some opportunity to shadow. There'll be some coding classes. There'll be introductions to various different areas of Wise. And the idea is to really break down barriers to entering the tech industry and to give opportunity to kind of come in and see for yourself what it's like to work for us. So this is really kind of an entry-level first step or insights program, and we would encourage applications from first-year students, ideally people who are right at the beginning of their career. So that might be someone who's just switched careers or somebody who is looking to get back into the workforce after having a break. So it's an entry-level opportunity for you to really investigate whether working in the tech industry and as well at Wise is for you. The applications are open now, and that you can find them there again on our wise.jobs site. We also have internships. So this is more of a formal program which takes 10 weeks, and that starts at the end of June next year. So that will be 10 weeks finishing at the beginning of September. And all of our opportunities for internships are currently in engineering, but you can intern in a front end, back end, or a mobile engineering role. The applications are open now, and during the time you're with us, you'll be assessed for a full-time role. So it's an absolutely amazing opportunity for you to get yourself a graduate full-time position. Now, we've just finished our internship program, and we were able to hire all of our interns into roles starting in September next year. So just goes to show kind of what a brilliant start to your career that can be. And then if you graduate this year, or if you graduated last year, you can apply to our full-time entry-level positions. And we have those available in engineering, data science, and also some finance roles, which are super technical and require Python and SQL for those positions. But apart from the programs that I've just mentioned, so apart from the Wise Women Code, internships and graduate roles, we have lots and lots of other technical roles available. And if we just go to the next slide, Samira, I've put a QR code so anyone can go to that. I don't know. Oh, yeah, there we go. You can register your interest, and it's a really, really quick way of just saying, hey, really interested, would like to hear more. You don't necessarily need to know what you want to do, or you don't need to know whether you necessarily kind of qualify for any particular position. We would just be really, really keen to hear from you. I'm happy to talk, give advice, whether it's to join Wise or kind of more broadly around careers. So if you want to drop your details there, look at our and then look at our website. And if we'll contact you you put input in your contact details, and we'll come back to you and let you know what opportunities might be best suited to you. And that is it from me. We will leave it there.
We have a question actually from Miss Webb of, do you have apprenticeship roles?
Yeah, brilliant question. We do. And we have apprenticeship roles. Sorry, I should have mentioned that the reason that they're not open at the moment is because we partner with an external apprenticeship provider called Multiverse. And Multiverse, we work with them to hire apprentices, and we don't currently have live roles open with them. However, we definitely will be doing. We're about to open an apprenticeship role. It's for within the analytics team. So that will be advertised on the Multiverse website. So if you want to pop your interest down through this QR code, through that link, and just say you're interested in hearing about apprenticeship roles, we can contact you about those when they go live. And in terms of our engineering specific apprenticeship roles, we will be taking another intake early next year. That we'll be making those roles live. So yeah, not currently open at the moment, but definitely something to keep an eye on, and happy to keep in touch with anybody about that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right.
No
I think
problem at all.
we've come to the end of our time slot. But yeah, thank you so much, ladies, for taking the time and sharing about WISE, as well as sharing about open source, Samira. I think that was really useful.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I said in the YouTube comments, this video it's been recorded, so it'll be live on this YouTube link, and people will probably revisit it later on and watch it, and we'll probably get in touch with you guys. But just to wrap up, from both of you, what is like the one thing that you want the audience to take away from tonight?
Please contribute to open source.
Just like help me with open source.
Amazing.
Yeah, you don't have to contribute. Just use it. Build something, and could be just a simple script. Doesn't have to be like elaborate software or anything. Just build in something. Yeah, it's the most. That's how you're gonna learn. Build stuff.
I think it's just the fact that Samira works in this role at WISE. I think it's evidence of the kind of the collaborative spirit that I see all the time working here, and the fact that, we're kind of providing, it's for the greater community, it's for the tech community. And I think that's like super impressive, and a really cool job that Samira has.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, ladies. And thank you all for watching and participating with us. I'm going to end the broadcast now. So have a good evening, everybody. It was good seeing you. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks
Bye.
for having us. Bye-bye.